Hi, I'm Emily Carter, divorce lawyer. I've seen hundreds of marriages fall apart, but what I'm about to show you, this one shocked me like nothing else. You've probably seen the viral divorce glow-up story online, but the truth behind it, it's nothing like what people are telling you. Secrets, lies, and betrayals, all hidden behind that perfect social media smile. And today, I'm going to reveal exactly what really happened. Before the cameras, before the glow-up, when no one was watching. When she first walked into my office, I noticed immediately that she carried the weight of years of unseen suffering. She wasn't just tired, there was a quiet resignation in her posture, a cautious hesitation in her eyes. It was the kind of presence that speaks volumes without saying a word. She sat across from me, hands tightly clasped in her lap, and for a moment I wasn't sure if she would speak at all. But then, slowly, she began. This wasn't just another routine divorce case. There was a depth to her story, a complexity that I could sense even before she uttered a single word. She wasn't seeking attention. She wasn't trying to make a scene. She was simply trying to survive. From the outside, her marriage had looked perfect. Social media told one story: vacations, anniversaries, birthday celebrations, smiling selfies in matching outfits, and affectionate captions. Friends and family would comment on what a lovely couple they were, how enviable their life appeared. But what I quickly realized was that the life people saw online was a carefully curated illusion. Behind the curated photos and the cheerful posts was a reality no one wanted to acknowledge: a marriage defined by control, manipulation, and quiet emotional abuse. Over the years, small things had begun to erode her sense of self. Decisions that should have been simple, what to wear, where to eat, how to spend her free time, were constantly scrutinized and dismissed. Her opinions were met with sarcasm, belittling comments, or subtle hints that she was overreacting. Each criticism, each subtle dismissal, chipped away at her confidence until she began questioning her instincts and doubting her own worth. She had become a shadow of the vibrant, confident woman she had once been, lost in a world where her voice barely mattered. When she came to me, she was at a crossroads. She didn't know if she had the courage to leave. She didn't know if the law would be on her side. She didn't know if she could face the truth of what her life had become. And yet, there was something undeniable about the determination in her eyes, a glimmer of strength that had survived all the years of being diminished and overlooked. I knew from the very first moment that this case was about more than just property, custody, or financial settlements. This case was about reclaiming a life, a sense of identity, and a voice that had been suppressed for far too long. Our first few meetings were tense. She spoke in fragments, hesitant and cautious. At times, I had to gently coax information out of her, aware that every word carried the weight of years of fear and mistrust. But as we spoke, patterns began to emerge. I noticed discrepancies, inconsistencies, and signs of deliberate manipulation. Hidden debts that she hadn't been aware of, messages meant to confuse or guilt her, promises broken in ways that were almost imperceptible but left lasting emotional scars. With each revelation, it became painfully clear that the life she thought she knew was built on layers of deception. It wasn't just the financial manipulation that shocked me. It was the psychological control. Her spouse had isolated her subtly, undermining her confidence in ways that were invisible to everyone else. Friends who tried to intervene were dismissed or subtly discredited. Family who expressed concern were told she was overreacting, that she was imagining things. Slowly, over months and years, she had been made to feel that she was at fault for every disagreement, every argument, every unhappiness. And the worst part was, she had begun to believe it herself. But even in that darkness, I saw something remarkable. There was a spark within her, a faint but undeniable light that refused to be extinguished. It was the same spark that had brought her to my office, the spark that had allowed her to seek help, to confront the reality of her situation, and to take the first steps toward reclaiming her life. I realized that this spark was fragile, but it was also resilient, and if nurtured, it could become the foundation for her transformation, her escape from a life that had quietly suffocated her. As we began to organize her case, reviewing documents, messages, and financial records, the picture became painfully clear. The person she had married, the one who smiled in photographs, who appeared loving and devoted, was someone entirely different behind closed doors. The affection she had believed was genuine had often been a tool of manipulation, a way to maintain control while keeping the truth hidden. And the more we uncovered, the more I understood why so many people fall into these situations, unable to see the full scope of the deceit until it is too late. I spent hours with her going through every detail, every memory, every interaction that had contributed to the erosion of her confidence and independence. She began to recognize patterns she had overlooked, moments where manipulation had been disguised as concern and criticism had been disguised as advice. Each recognition was painful, yet it was also liberating. She was beginning to understand that none of this was her fault, that her instincts had been right all along, and that the life she wanted and deserved was still possible. By the end of the first part of our work together, she had begun to find her voice. She was cautious, yes, and at times overwhelmed, but she was no longer silent. She began asking questions, seeking clarity, and asserting her needs. And as her confidence grew, so did my conviction that this case was going to be more than just a legal proceeding. It was going to be a story of transformation, resilience, and empowerment. The journey ahead would not be easy. There would be battles, revelations, and moments that tested her strength. But in that first meeting, I realized that she had what it took to reclaim her life, to confront the truth, and to step into a future defined not by the manipulation of others, but by her own choices, courage, and determination. And as a divorce lawyer, seeing that spark ignite within a client is one of the most powerful experiences I can witness. A reminder that even after years of suppression, people can find their way back to themselves. As we continued working together, the reality of her marriage began to surface in ways that were almost unbearable to recount. The more she shared, the clearer it became that what the world had seen, the happy couple, the smiling photos, the vacation posts, was nothing more than a mask. Beneath it all was a life defined by control, secrecy, and manipulation. And the longer she had stayed, the more entangled she had become, not just emotionally, but financially and socially as well. She told me about the small betrayals first, how he would dismiss her feelings, make her doubt herself, and subtly undermine her decisions. At the time, they seemed minor, almost insignificant. But over the years, these tiny acts compounded into a pattern of quiet abuse. Each time she tried to assert herself, she was met with anger, passive-aggressive behavior, or calculated indifference. Slowly, she had stopped trusting her own judgment, always second-guessing herself, always questioning whether her reactions were valid. Then came the bigger betrayals. She discovered secret accounts, unexplained withdrawals, and debts she had never agreed to. Every financial decision had been manipulated to benefit him while keeping her in the dark. And it wasn't just money. It was the manipulation of perception itself. Friends and family who tried to help were subtly turned against her. She began to realize that much of the isolation she had felt was orchestrated, that her partner had carefully engineered a world in which she doubted everyone, including herself. As we pieced together the evidence, it became a story of deception, layered upon deception. Emails contradicted earlier statements. Text messages revealed carefully constructed lies. Even the timeline of their relationship, the milestones they had celebrated, had been manipulated to create a false sense of normalcy. It was exhausting to hear, but I knew this was necessary. She needed to see the full picture before she could truly take control of her life. And yet, amidst all this, there were moments of human complexity that made the story even more difficult. She spoke of the times he had been charming, attentive, even affectionate. Those memories made her question everything. How could someone capable of such warmth also be capable of such deception? But this duality is what makes cases like hers so challenging, and why many people remain trapped in toxic marriages far longer than they should. The mind clings to the good, hoping it can outweigh the bad, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. As a lawyer, I had to navigate not just the legal intricacies, but the emotional landscape as well. I had to help her separate the lies from the truth, the manipulation from reality, and the guilt from responsibility. Each session was painstaking. We went through every interaction, every message, every event that had contributed to her sense of confusion and despair. And with each layer uncovered, I could see her slowly reconnecting with her own instincts, her own judgment, her own voice. By this point, it was clear that this case was going to be complicated. Her spouse was cunning, aware of the legal system, and determined to maintain control even as the truth emerged. We needed to anticipate every move, prepare for every possible argument, and ensure that her rights and her safety were fully protected. But despite the challenges, I could see a shift in her demeanor. The fear that had dominated her presence when she first arrived was beginning to give way to determination. She was beginning to understand the scope of what had been done to her, and that understanding was empowering. It wasn't just about uncovering financial misdeeds or pointing out lies. It was about validating her experiences, affirming that she had been right to trust her instincts, and reinforcing that her life could be rebuilt on her own terms. Each revelation brought pain, but also clarity. And clarity, in this case, was freedom. We began preparing for court, reviewing evidence meticulously, and discussing strategies to counter any attempt to manipulate the proceedings. I reminded her constantly that this was not just a legal battle, it was a reclaiming of her narrative. And as we worked, I saw her confidence grow. She began to assert her boundaries, ask questions, and demand explanations. The woman who had once sat quietly, uncertain and fearful, was slowly emerging stronger, more focused, and ready to face the challenge ahead. Even in this early stage, the transformation was remarkable. Her eyes, once clouded with doubt and uncertainty, now reflected determination. Her voice, which had been quiet and hesitant, now carried clarity. And though the road ahead was still long, fraught with legal maneuvers and emotional confrontations, she had taken the first crucial step, reclaiming herself. By the end of these weeks, it was clear that this case was going to be remembered, not just for the legal victory, but for the journey of empowerment it represented. What had begun as a story of betrayal and manipulation was evolving into a story of courage, clarity, and reclamation. And as her lawyer, I knew that every piece of evidence we uncovered, every strategy we implemented, and every painful truth she faced was bringing her closer to the life she deserved.